is Marie Alessi with the beautiful Marcy Larson right next to me. And I want to tell you a quick story about Marcy and how we met before I get her to introduce herself. And I have mentioned this platform before. There's a platform called podmatch.com, and this is where you can actually meet other people to interview them or be interviewed. It's a really nice community where people match potential guests for interviews. And I wanted to share this little story before I get Marcy to talk, because when I came across your story, Marcy, I thought, I am not sure if I'm the right person for your podcast, and people will understand in a minute when we share this. So I decided to reach out to you anyway and tell you who I am and what I do. And you were the exact same. You were like, I'm not sure if that lady is the right match. And then you went on my website and had a look there. It was like, oh, we need to talk. So to cut a long story short, we had an interview for Marcy's podcast. I'm not going to take more away than that. I want her to share a little bit about her podcast. And now I've got the absolute honor to have her here, because Marcy's story is really so inspiring. Marcy, I'm so honored to have you here. So thank you so much. Welcome to Upspiral Brief. And please do us the honor to introduce yourself to our audience.
Well, thank you so much for that kind introduction. You are 100% right when you said you weren't quite sure, because I absolutely felt the same way. I read your information and I thought, I don't know. And then just the more I knew about you, the more intrigued I got. And wow, I was so excited by our last conversation. I am really thrilled to be able to talk to you more, because I just felt so drawn to you, really, and what you've been doing with your movement. So thank you for having me. So just as a little bit of an introduction, so I am from Michigan in the United States. I am a pediatrician. I've been practicing pediatrics for about 20 years now. I have 3 biological children, 1 foster son, and in general, life was going pretty well. I had certainly some experience with grief in the past. I lost my mother when I was in college. She died of cancer, and that was incredibly hard. Certainly the most difficult thing I'd ever gone through. But I thought, I got through that and things are going pretty well for me. We got our foster son. He had to go through an entire kidney transplant. Certainly there were these fears that something's going to happen to him. We're going to lose him, but everything was great. And, we got to go on this big Make-A-Wish trip to celebrate him making it through and getting his new kidney. And we felt like we were on cruise control. He was 17. He was 17, and it's been 5 years now since he's had his new kidney. So he's done incredibly well. He is my foster son from Guatemala. So that was obviously a big cultural thing for us to take in this Guatemalan young teenager. I said other families get a dog. We decided to get a Guatemalan teenager who needed a kidney transplant. So incredible. But anyway, I was, practicing as a pediatrician 3 days a week and doing some administrative stuff on the other days, and everything was great. And then my family and I, actually just 2 of the boys, my son Valeriano was at work, my daughter Catherine was at a violin lesson. So we took 2 of the boys to a baseball game, and we were having an event with our office, and the boys were super excited because you get to eat all the food you can. And they hadn't even eaten much of the day because they were going to gorge themselves on food. So we were in the exit lane about to go off the freeway, and a woman was apparently not paying attention. It was the construction zone, and we were in an exit lane and barely moving, but she just came flying out of nowhere, rear-ended us, and my son Andy was killed instantly. So he was 14 at the time. I was knocked unconscious for a short period of time. His brother was right there. He lost consciousness a little bit as well, but was there, watched his brother die. My husband's an anesthesiologist. He tried to work on him to get him back. I came to maybe 20 to 30 minutes later, not knowing what was going on. Of course. And I'm, being a pediatrician, and him an anesthesiologist, we felt like we should have been able to save him. But he was killed instantly. And there was nothing we could do. And it was just devastating. And it completely, I thought I knew grief. I thought I understood that, having gone through what I did growing up. Both my parents had cancer. My mom eventually died. I mean, I felt like I know this, right? But I didn't. I didn't know this at all. And it just felt just lost. And for the next, for a few weeks, I can't go back to work. Then I tried to go back to work, and then that was a disaster. And it turns out I just needed to take time. I needed to take time to try to heal. Yeah, it was very hard to do pediatrics after you lost your child, because now you're just seeing these whole families. And it was just hard. It was just really hard. And then it was funny. One day I had this revelation, and it was a few months later. I was shopping, and whenever I would go shopping, I would see these families, especially if I saw a mother with her 3 children, because I always think of myself as having 3 young children, because we got Valeriano when he was a teen, so much older. So when I would see these moms with 3 children, I would always look at the middle one, and I would think to myself, what would you do if you lost that one? Right? And I would get so tearful and think about that. And then one day I had a revelation that I don't know that there weren't 4. From the outside, I don't know that she didn't have 4 kids or 5 kids or 6 kids, and that they're gone. I don't know that her husband didn't die 3 weeks ago. I have no idea. Because when I go out to a restaurant with my kids, I look like a whole family. I don't look like I'm missing a huge piece. So anyway, it was huge for me. And it got me to really think about people in such a different way, in really a more compassionate way, because I have no idea what they're going through. Because I knew that from the outside, I looked whole.
It truly opens up your entire world to so many more possibilities, and unfortunately not always in a good way. It really opens yourself up to what could have happened to this family, or what could be the rest of their family life like, because all of a sudden you are ripped out of this beautiful, nice family, everything's going well, and you're completely ripped out of this sheltered reality, so to say, into a reality where you thought that you knew adversity, and where you thought that, I remember you sharing this story with me, and your foster son, and going through the kidney transplant, that you thought if anything would happen, then it would be potentially to him. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, life had a different path for you, and that was so unexpected. Marcy, if you don't mind, I know this is really confronting, but it's also, I understand that there are quite a few people watching this that have been in similar situations, or maybe completely different life situations, but also have lost a child. And I am not here to compare, and I know we touched on the topic before as well, but I want to share this here again, because it's a different audience now, and I am very particular about not comparing grief stories. I'd like, though, if you can, take us back to that moment when you came out of unconsciousness, and you see your husband trying to revive your son, and you obviously become aware of your other son being there watching him. Was he the eldest, the other one watching, or was he the youngest?
He was my middle child. So my older 2, the foster son, and then my daughter, and then my son 14, and then my younger son Peter. They were
Peter was in the car with you?
And Peter was in the car with us. Peter was sitting right behind Eric, and Andy was right behind me. I mean, I do remember that moment when I came to. I think people had thought I had somehow gotten out of the car, and when I became aware of my surroundings, I was already sitting. So I think I was awake, but I wasn't aware, right? And I don't have any memory. So I remember, the first thing I remember is turning around and looking over my right shoulder. And by that point, there were paramedics everywhere. I think we counted in the police report, there may have been 6 or maybe even 8 ambulances there, 3 fire trucks, police everywhere. And there were 3 paramedics doing CPR on my son. And they had a tube in his chest, and it was horrible. It was horrible to see. And my husband by that point was in front of me, because what had happened was he was working on him, and people kept coming, and he kept asking for IV supplies, asking for something to intubate him, asking for all of these things, and no one had anything. And no one at first took over for him, because he knew the most of anyone there, right?
Yeah.
He's the one that took him out of the car. He's the one that laid him out. There was a medic there who was a former Army medic, and he happened to be there to be able to help him. But they were working on him together until finally enough paramedics came with supplies, and they said, we need to take over. You go be with your wife. And so he came to me, and I looked over and I saw that. And then I looked at Eric, and he was bleeding. And I said, is he going to be okay? And he said, at first he said, yes. And then he said, they're doing the best they can. And I knew that meant no. I knew that meant no. And so I just started screaming, just this screaming. And all I kept screaming was, please God, please God, please God, over and over. It's all I could say. And I'm just begging, right? I'm just begging. And I'm looking, and then the firemen, I'm just hysterical. And they said, ma'am, we need you to go be with your other son, because they had put him in a fire truck at that point, because they wanted to get him away. But interestingly enough, they put him in a fire truck with the door open, looking exactly at them doing the CPR on his brother. So he wasn't sheltered from that at all. He was watching the whole thing.
How old was Peter at the time?
He was 12.
12?
He was 12. Yeah. And so I said to Peter, he got in, and I don't remember the very beginning, but I remember saying, we just need to pray, because I just was so desperate. And I just kept saying, please God, I don't even know what else. And I don't know how long we were in there together. Not very long. The fireman did then shut the door, because I think he was realizing that Peter's watching all of this. Yeah. And then someone came back into the fire truck and said, ma'am, we need to take you into different ambulances to check you out, because Peter had been unconscious and I had been unconscious, and I was bleeding. And so anyway, they said they were taking me to an ambulance for that. And I walked to the ambulance, and I met Eric there, and they walked us both in, but they didn't put us on a gurney. They put us on chairs in the ambulance. And then the paramedic said, despite our best efforts, we were unable to save your son. So they just told us that right there. And it was just so shocking to me. I just remember thinking, you don't die on the side of the road. How do you die on the side of the road? You make it to the hospital, right? It just was. It was just so horrible. And then I just started making phone calls and calling people. Like, I called my nurse that I work with, because she was at the baseball game, and they were all at the baseball game waiting for me, my whole office. And then I remember saying, we've been in an accident and Andy's dead. And every time I told that, I had to say it like that. I had to say it like that, because I thought, I don't want to say anything else, because I don't want there to be any question if he's dead or if he's not dead. I don't want to do follow-up to this. I don't want to be in I don't want to just say we're in a car accident, because then the next thing is, everybody okay? Or and I didn't want there to be any doubt. I remember finding out later that Andy's best friend's mom found out about the accident that night. And she just found out that there was an accident and it was bad, but she didn't know he was dead right away. And so she was like trying to figure out, is he in the hospital? We should go to the hospital. Trying to figure out all these things. And that's like the last thing I wanted. I just didn't want all of this follow-up garbage. So I just put it out there every single time. There's been an accident and Andy's dead. But every time I had to repeat it, because every time they said, what? because
It
no
is
one could
almost
believe
like
that it
that
happened, you know?
convincing yourself as well. It's like something you have to say out loud. I've had quite a few moments where I thought out like I needed self, like I needed to hear myself. Uh,
Mhm.
It's
It's
quite,
just because it was so unbelievable and so
surreal.
like I couldn't really wrap my head around it, and I couldn't really believe it. So I felt like I had to say it again and again and again so that a little bit of me might start to believe this, because I was just having a conversation with him, right? We were just talking before the car hit us about how I was going to go home and find a book for him. He wanted to read Lord of the Rings, and we had a copy in the office, and I was going to pick it out for him. And that's what we were talking about. And then
Yeah.
literally 10 seconds later, he was dead. I mean, it just was impossible for me to believe, and so much different than what had happened to me in the past. And this again goes to comparing loss and how you can't even compare losses with yourself, right? Because I lost my mom, and that was horrible. I watched her die over 5 years from her cancer. You know, that is an entirely different experience. And I remember seeing parents now, bereaved parents who lost their children and had to watch them suffer and die. And I think to myself, oh, I'm so glad I didn't have to do that. That would be so much worse. Well, there is no, it's just all bad. It doesn't matter. You know, your experience is your experience. And it, you know, they think mine is worse. I think theirs is worse. You know, you can, there's no arguing about it. It's just all different.
You said as well, when you tell your story again, and we do, because people ask, and then you friends and family, more and more people, years, it comes forward that really well. And you learn, you know, it's so different. You get almost your story because your story is more and more reality rather than because you need to live it yourself with that as a reality, but across something else, their story can't hear it.
I am having a hard time understanding you right now. We do not have the best connection, so I'm catching not all of the words. So
It might be a headphone.
okay, let's see. Oh, now I can't hear you at all, but maybe it was that. Can you still hear me? I can't hear you at all. Did you turn off your earbud connection too, maybe? I almost feel like I should just keep chatting while you are while you are trying to get your sound going. I can't hear you. Anyway, since we are in a little bit of pause, I can talk about how my podcast started. I think that would be a good thing to talk about too. So as I took, are you back? Not yet. I don't think there's a way for us to, but there is a way for us to chat. Let me see. Because I still can't. Oh,
yes.
You were there for a second.
Yes.
Are you better?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Perfect.
Thank goodness.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Yes.
So I'm really glad that I've got you back. I'm sorry for that.
Okay.
Where do we leave off now? I got completely.
I don't know. I was like, oh, I'm only catching about every fifth word. And I kept hoping you would come back, but you just didn't quite. So
sorry for that. So where were we? I think it was all about that, coming to terms with reality and how surreal your own story feels to you at first. And then you tell it over and over again and you come to terms with reality and it becomes your story. It becomes part of your history as well. And then you meet other people and they tell their story for the 100th time. But for you, it's still the first time that you hear it. So it hits you very differently because you can also relate to the shock, to the feeling of everything being surreal and you still having to come to terms with it. So yeah, I always say, comparison doesn't help any of us. It's that we all need to learn to hold space for each other and to just be there and listen and let people share their story without having to add hours onto the plate and without having to go like, yeah, I mean, it's sometimes nice to share things where like, I can relate, I understand you, but also giving the other person space to really share their story. And
I think it just can be beautiful to share stories with each other and to be able to, I mean, I just feel so much more compassion towards other people. I know you have that same feeling too. And it is just so nice to be able to really appreciate them and appreciate their stories, which I think we can do now.
Yeah.
So I do want to tell you about how my podcast came to be.
Sorry,
as well.
Please. Let's go there. I'd like to just one more moment. I just wanted to say this one thing. I think there's also that balancing act when it's nice to share stories and everybody can get their part in all of that. But there are also moments where you just need to learn to hold space for others and let them speak. Do you know what I mean? And I think that was the point that I wanted to make, that often people feel the need to add on top of your story and add to that rather than, letting everybody have their moment. That's what I meant by that. But either way.
Yeah, I am in a grief support group now. I help lead that grief support group. It's at a place called Starlight Ministries, and we have 6-week sessions. And it's very much like that because our first session, we first of all, each session has kind of a theme and a goal and something we're working through. So the last session was the pearls of grief. And so we talked about having your dive team around you, having your team around, things to the ways that you can grow and that a pearl grows through. You don't get a pearl unless you go through some trauma, right? That an oyster has to go through trauma to get a pearl. And in each of those 6-week sessions, week 2 is the week that we share our stories. But it is just week 2. It is not all 6 weeks, and it's not sharing and sharing and sharing and comparing. That's what we do on week 2. And every week we have something that we look to and we all share with each other, and it's just beautiful. But I do love that it isn't you share your story every single week. It's a one time that we do that, and then to get to know each other, really to get to know that person a little bit more, and then we can grow together and try to get some healing together. And then when you go through all these 6-week sessions, there are like two, we have 4 sessions, I think, in a year, and you can go through 2 years and then you're really done. And we hope that you will be able to have learned those tools that you have come to some healing.
I love that. I always call it, I want to know your story so I know where I'm picking you up from and not where I leave you. This is really quite important to allow people to be seen where you pick them up from, but also to help them on their path of the healing journey and not leave them behind where they were, So Marcy, tell me about your beautiful podcast. You started a podcast. How did that come about?
Yeah, it's kind of a crazy story when it comes down to it. So my husband has a podcast himself. It's on healthcare, and he had it long before Andy died. And well, not long before. I think he'd put out maybe around 20 episodes or so.
What's the name? You can give him a quick shout out if you want to.
Oh yes. So it's called The Paradox, and it's PARADOCS because he always interviews another doctor. It's a paradox. So anyway, He does that. And I thought he listens to podcasts.
Mhm.
And as I'm at home in my grief, not doing well, I
Mhm.
thought to myself, maybe I should listen to a podcast for
Yeah.
grieving parents. So I look up and try to find a podcast for grieving parents, and there was not one.
Mm.
And I thought, I can't believe there's not one. And I said to my husband, I tried to find a podcast for grieving parents today, and there isn't one. I don't think there is one. And he said, oh, there has to be one. And he
Yeah.
starts looking. And then he realizes, no, you're right. There's not one. And I, for some crazy reason, said, I think I'm supposed to start one.
Mm.
So bizarre, not a me thing at all. I am not a techie kind of person. I didn't even really listen to podcasts except some of my husband's.
Mm.
This was completely out of left field for me, but I felt honestly like that's what I was supposed to do.
Mm.
And I sort of was like, what are you saying? And I kind of went back a little bit, but my husband jumped all over it because he thought, you're right. This is what you're supposed to do. And so we decide, we get a webpage, we do this. I start interviewing a couple of people, and I realized, when you go through something like this, you have to kind of come up with a bit of a new identity in some ways. You have to look at yourself and think, who am I?
Yeah.
Because we were talking about this earlier, like in those days, I was thinking to myself, who am I now?
Mm.
I'm not a mom with 3 biological children and 1 foster son. I don't feel like I'm that anymore. I don't even feel like I'm a good mom. I feel like I'm a barely hanging on mom, not doing a very good job with the kids I have right now. I was a pediatrician. I don't feel like I'm that anymore either because I'm not practicing. And so I had to kind of redefine myself. And I realized that I'm a caregiver, that I like to care for people.
Yeah.
And that's really what my whole personality has been. And it's not any different now that I'm a grieving caregiver. I just do it differently. And so I realized that's why I wanted to do the podcast, because I really feel called to help people and help care for people. And this would be a way I could help care for grieving parents, because I felt like I couldn't really help care for parents whose children were living at that moment because I was having a hard time doing that.
Yeah.
But so I started the podcast, and interestingly, within about 2 months of me starting the podcast, I was back at work.
Wow.
Because
It wasn't
the
out.
healing it brought me was amazing.
Yeah.
I all of a sudden hearing these stories from these other parents, hearing them share their stories to help keep their children's memory alive, to talk about ways that we can heal, ways that we can kind of continue moving and not feel stuck in our grief. It just really, I mean, every single person that I interview, I feel like I take a little bit from that.
Yeah.
And I was getting just this feedback from people all over the world talking about how helpful that was and how they appreciated this. And I mean, I remember my very first review that I got on iTunes was a woman who's now a dear friend of mine. But anyway, she said, I couldn't get up. My son died. It was 2 or 3 weeks before. And she said, I can't get out of bed until I listen to your podcast.
Wow. That
And
is
when she
so
listens,
beautiful.
listens,
That is so beautiful. And, I want to highlight a couple of things that you said here. We tend to, in society, work a lot with labels, and for me, when Rob passed, I really didn't like the label widow. I just felt like it didn't suit me. And what you said before, I wanted to pick that up because that is a really, really big question, that who am I after that adversity, we offered a healing journey in Loving Life After Loss at the very beginning that was called Who Am I After Loss, and it was really about that whole re-identification process that we go through when adversity hits us, when something really big happens in our life. And it doesn't always have to be adversity, but when there's a big transition going on, there's always that part of you that needs to re-identify herself. And some parts will stay the same. Like you said, you figured out, I am a caregiver. I was that before, I am that after. And other parts are completely new. You might get to know parts of you that you had never seen before, or never recognized before, or never let come out, if that makes sense. So I think it's a really beautiful process as well. I often refer to that as hidden gifts in adversity, when we get this opportunity to get to know ourselves from a very, very different angle. And in our pre-chat, Marcy and I, we had a quick chat about my last week's interview when I talked to Terry. And Terry is a motherling, and we explained that the term motherling is for a mom who's lost her only child. And I think it's so beautiful that there is a word for that, that we can give it a name. Yet there is no word for a mom that had 3 biological children and then has 2. There is no label per se. And as much as I do not like labels, it sometimes leaves us with, what do I call this? And also that wish to express to other people who we are and what has happened in our lives. And I don't know about you, Marcy, I know some from our previous interview, but I'd really like to share that here as well. In terms of when we walk around, you gave me such a gift, and I would like you to share that with our audience here as well. When you walk around and people ask you, it is a very, very common question when you see a mum with children to ask, so
how many children do you have?
Would you like to share? Because you gave me such a beautiful gift in how we can rephrase that, and I absolutely love it.
Yeah, I got this from one of my interviews that I did earlier, that instead of asking somebody that question, how many children do you have, you say, tell me about your family. Because when you say, when I am asked how many children do I have, I have such a hard time knowing what to do.
Yeah.
Because I can say how many children I have and just hope that they don't ask how old they are, because one of them is now dead. I can leave him out, but that feels like betraying him somehow. And it really gives me just kind of an icky feeling to not mention him. It bothers me a lot. So I don't like to do that. But it's hard to know, because in a different situation, you don't know how to answer that. Like, I was talking to a mom, this is now probably almost 2 years ago, and she had a son who died. And then she had a daughter, and she was at McDonald's with her mother and her daughter. And someone at McDonald's said, oh, is that your first child? And she said, yes. And her mother was horrified that she said yes, because she didn't, acknowledge the fact that she had another child who had died. But she turned to her mom and said, I'm in McDonald's. I don't want to go there. I don't want to talk to this random woman. It was easier for me to say yes, right? But yet you do feel sometimes this sort of guilt. But if you say, tell me about your family,
it's so beautiful.
Well, now you can do whatever you want. You're so open, because I can just say, oh, I've got a daughter at the University of Michigan. I've got a son at the Aviation Academy. I've got my foster son, Valeriano. I cannot mention Andy and not have it be a big deal. I could talk about my husband. I could not talk about my husband. I could talk about my brother in Iowa or not talk about him. But it just gives me the freedom to go so many directions and to not end up feeling a little bit of guilt about it. Because as parents, we always feel guilt. I mean, you don't want to do that, but I mean, I talk to moms all the time. I talk to bereaved parents all the time. I said, mom guilt is a real thing. The very first time you leave your child with a babysitter, you feel guilty. So after they die, no matter how they die, like, there was absolutely nothing I could have done to avoid Andy's death, nothing at all. But yet I still feel mom guilt. I still feel like, oh, I could have done this. I could have done this. So it's not something I can totally get rid of. But if I can ask a much easier question that will now not give someone any sort of feeling of mom guilt, I think it's great. So I'm trying to spread that. Tell me about your family. So hopefully anyone listening will now take that. We'll never ask another person, how many kids do you have? But we'll instead say, tell me about your
family. I love this so much, because it's also such a soft approach. And as you said, no matter whether they have experienced adversity or not in their family, it leaves it open to what you want to share. And that's what I love about it. It normalizes everything. It gives everybody the same chance, and it opens it up to whoever you ask to share whatever they want, and can't ever make anybody feel awkward about it. And it's really interesting, because the other day I had a guy ask me, so are you married? And to give that away up front, he was a widow stalker, and I knew from a mile away. I have no idea how he got through to me, and I don't even know why I got into the conversation, but because I knew instantly, I thought, and this is maybe a little bit mean, but I thought, I'm going to play that game with you and see how far you take it. Because I, with this group, have learned so much. I had no idea about that beforehand, that's even a thing, a widow stalker. I was mortified when I first learned about this. And everything he said was stereotypical. The way he addressed me, the way he talked to me, the way he's like, and I did not get into any of his question. And then that question came, and that's why I'm sharing this story here. It's like, something about my children. And I said, I'm a sole parent. And then he said, are you married? And I almost got angry. I said, I think the term sole parent would have given that away. And he said, yeah, but I just wanted to know. And then I thought, you know what? It doesn't give it away, because just that I'm a sole parent doesn't mean that I'm not remarried, or that I'm not, even considering that. And so it brought me back to your question. And I really thought, this is so much smoother, and it's so much kinder to ask that question, because I have come to a point in my life where I'm actually quite okay sharing about this, yet that triggered something in me. And I could feel anger come up. I'm like, wow, that's interesting. I have not felt anger in a really long time, but maybe because I knew his whole intention, I was already with my guards up, if that makes sense. So it really triggered me. And I thought,
well, and I was thinking too, even if you have a woman in her mid 30s who maybe has never married and does not have children, they will still, you get that automatic question, right? That how many kids do you have? And if she doesn't have kids, that's why if you ask this woman, tell me about your family.
So over saying, no, I'm not married. No, I don't have children.
Right. Then she doesn't have to say no. She can tell me about your family. Is going to be my sister, right? It just gives so much more permission, and it doesn't make anyone feel uncomfortable, no matter what your circumstance. So
absolutely. And I love that. It really opens it up, and it keeps it a beautiful opportunity to share whatever you want to. Marcy, I want to go back to your podcast though. So you decided that you're going to start a podcast. You were interviewing people, and you said about 2 months in, you went back to work. And then the podcast kept going. So how long have you been doing the podcast now?
It's now been over 2 years. So I just am recording tomorrow. Actually tomorrow will be a live stream. So anyone who would want to get on the Always Annie's Mom Facebook page or the Always Annie's Mom YouTube channel, I will be live streaming tomorrow, episode 114. So, and that will be at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Okay. So in Australia, that's an hour and 20 minutes from now tomorrow. So whatever time you are at right now. But
it would be 12 p.m. for us here in Sydney.
There you go. So anyway, so I'm at 114 episodes. So part of them I do with Gwen, who used to run that Starlight Ministries that I was talking about earlier. She has now her own business called yourgriefguide.com, but she's a social worker and a certified thanatologist, which I didn't know what that was, but that is someone who is certified in the study of death and dying. And she really only works with bereaved people, and she's amazing. Simply amazing. So I do an episode probably about every 6 weeks with her, and we talk about many different topics. So we talk about guilt, and we talk about anger, and we talk about post-traumatic growth, which is one of the things we were talking about. That's what we have termed it, post-traumatic growth, when you grow through your trauma. We talked about people, who do I want to be around? Who do I feel good around? So surrounding yourself with people that really help you. So she is amazing. We're doing one tomorrow on preparing for the holidays, kind of grieving through the holidays, and how that can be a challenging thing to do. So anyway, that will be, and so just recently I started doing those live on Facebook, and then we will put them to the podcast just later in the week. But it's been kind of a nice thing because people then can tune in and ask some questions. And I certainly hope that tomorrow we get plenty of questions that people are asking about what they might be able to do personally to get ready for that.
Yeah, for everybody listening to this, I'm actually going to ask Marcy to share the links to her podcast and everything, and to the Facebook group in the comments below, so people can actually find her and follow her if that's what speaks to you, or are you in a similar situation. I really, really love what you do. So you do the interviews on a weekly basis?
I do them, on a weekly basis. And obviously yours will be up in a few weeks. So I get to interview you too, which was great. It is off to the editor now. So I'll be getting that back shortly. I think that one will be in about 3 or 4 weeks, I'm pretty sure.
That's awesome.
So you will be able to hear Marie. But anyway, I do that every single week. And it's just so amazing. People's stories are so different, and yet everyone's so valuable. And I take something away from everyone. And I get to interview dads too. And we were talking a little bit before we started about kind of the differences.
Because
about the differences between moms and dads, and how dads sometimes are ignored a little bit.
Is because I really wanted to talk about that in our interview today, Marcy, because I noticed that it is very often the woman that gets asked, the mom that gets asked all the questions, and that also gets all the attention. And so often I've noticed that you never hear about the dad, and how did the dad deal with it, and how did the siblings deal with it. And I'd really like to talk a little bit about that, if that's okay with you, and because you would have a wealth of experience from your interviewees and also from your own husband, if you don't mind sharing a little bit the journey here, where you see the differences in how moms deal with it and how dads deal with it, and why they are so rarely talked about.
Yeah, I mean, moms are expected to fall apart and kind of be a mess, and dads are expected to be the tough one and hold it together and keep the family together and be there for your wife and be the strong one. And so challenging and really unfair to put all of that on someone. I know my husband Eric has really made it a point, I think, to try to be more open with his grief than others are, just to let them know that it's okay to be a man and to grieve. And it's not like he's cries all the time. He hardly ever does, actually, but to be able to talk about it, right? To be able to have it be not taboo. People turn to him a lot now and say, what should I do? What do I do? Because he's willing to talk about it. He shared a story of being in the operating room one day, and one of the nurses said, my neighbor's teenage son just died. I don't know what had happened, but she said, he just died. I always used to see him out mowing the lawn. I don't know what to do for my neighbors. And my husband turned to her and she said, mow the lawn. Right? Because do you know how hard it's going to be for that family to mow the lawn when the teenage son is the one mowing the lawn every 3 days? It's going to be impossible. So what do you do as a neighbor? You mow the lawn. You don't go and say, tell me if you need anything. Let me know if you need anything. Because they will never do that. They will never do that. But what you do instead is you go and you say, I was about ready to mow my lawn. I'd like to mow yours too. And then they can say no. But instead you have done that. So just to be open and just to be there, to be present. And to just
that's a big thing, that learning to allow help in was a big thing for me. And I have to say, it's so beautiful that you choose it as an example, because my neighbor, I'm surrounded by neighbors here. I'm very, very lucky that our house is in the middle of 6 houses around me. So I always feel very cradled in, very looked after, very protected. And one of my neighbors just opposite from here, I always look at the perfect yard from where I'm sitting, because he's a landscaper. So the first thing he did when Rob passed, he said, I'm going to mow your lawn until you're back on your feet. I'm going to look after your garden, if that's okay with you. And I was so grateful, because I did not know how to. And for 1.5 years, without once asking for anything in return, he looked after my garden. He cut my hedge, he mowed the lawn, and even on the weekend, 2 days ago, I was trying to fill the green bin and was going through, an overgrown garden again. I'm like, I really need to get a new landscape because I had a few different ones over the years now. But, the last one was not really, anyway, different story. And he was there with the whippersnipper and he's like, do you want me to just do your edges here? Because I was ripping it out by hand. I'm like, oh my God. And it's like, just say yes, Marie, yes, please, and thank you. And it's still something that doesn't come natural to me. And I was like, I would like to say yes. Thank you so much. I literally had to get myself to say yes, please. And it's really interesting how we still fall into this, or I still fall into this. I can do it all. I don't need it. So I love that you said that, because it's such an important one. Don't ever say, let me know if you need anything, because nobody.
I really, people would bring me food, brought us food for weeks and weeks. And they always said as they left, let me know if you need anything. And as I was shutting the door, I would think to myself, I will never call you. I will never call you. Every single time, I will never call you.
Yeah.
But I did have some of my friends that would say, I just remember one in particular saying, I'm going to Costco. What can I get for you?
Yeah, exactly.
And you know what I did? I gave her a list of a few things that I needed.
Awesome.
Because she didn't say, can I go get this for you? Because I would have said no. But instead, she said, I'm going anyway. And what can I get for you? You like, please give me a list. Not I didn't really have much of an opportunity of saying no. I mean, if I really didn't need anything, I could have said no, but it was kind of expected that I would give her a little list of things. And it was nice.
And it really helps, isn't it?
It's really painful to go to the grocery store at the beginning.
How you ask the question is such a difference, and I had people often ask me, so how do you want to be asked, or how should you, can you give our audience an example of what you do? And I said, I can cook for you on Tuesday or Thursday. Which day do you prefer? Okay, cool. On Thursday, I'm making lasagna. Do you like that? Or do you prefer if I make some chicken? Whatever, just the typical, very simple yes or no, left or right, Thursday or Tuesday, and that gives you the opportunity to not have to overthink, to just say, okay, Tuesday would be better for me because Thursday I've already got somebody look after me, or I've got something planned, or I'm going out for dinner, or whatever, it's just those. Making choices simple and not having to put something more on your plate, because if you already.
And I love how you gave those choices. This is what I tell parents to do of 2 and 3-year-olds. You give them a couple of choices. You don't give them overwhelming choices because they don't know how to handle it. A bereaved person is the exact same. They cannot handle too many choices. You have to get it down to just 2 or 3, and then that are all fine to you, and then they can pick one of them. It just makes it so much easier. And easier to feel like you can ask for help in that way, because you're not really asking, you're accepting.
Marcy, I want to come back to your husband one more time, if that's okay, because you said that Eric was trying to revive your son and Andy, and I just wanted to, because you mentioned mom guilt, and that is really huge. I can't even begin to imagine what your husband would have been through, with his background and trying to revive your son while you and your other son Peter were unconscious. How did he deal with that? Did he feel guilt? Did he have somebody to work through?
He talks about those first moments, because he didn't lose consciousness at all. The car hit us, and he did get quite a bad cut, so he's bleeding quite a bit from his head. But he said at first he almost laughed because he thought we were all okay. And he turned to me, and I was moaning, and he turned around and he heard Peter moaning. And then he looked at Andy, and there was no moaning, and just some blood from his nose, and no movement, no moaning, nothing. And then he had to struggle and get him out of the car, the seat belts, and he had to pull him out through the driver's seat because the van, we were in a minivan, but it was just completely destroyed. And he had to pull him up through the driver's seat. And now this medic is trying to help too, sort of through the window, but he couldn't really. And as he's starting to work on him, he told me in even the furthest recesses of his mind, did he not think he would be able to get him back. He absolutely thought he would. I mean, that's what he does, right? He thought he would be able to get him back. He did not think that Andy would die. Yeah. Like, all of this is happening, and yet he was like, he said the thought that kept going through his mind was because he was bleeding quite badly, and he said all he kept thinking was, I need to get him volume. I need to get him volume. I need to put in an IV. Mm-hmm. And so every time someone showed up, he kept asking to put an IV, because that's what he does, right? You're in a trauma, you put in IVs, you give him blood, you give him volume, you give, and that's why he just kept thinking, if only I could get him an IV. And then, and then he's doing airway stuff, and he's trying to do all of this, and yet, nothing was working. And it was hard for him to go back to work that first time. He was home. He wasn't home that long. He was home maybe 3 weeks, and he went back. They were very nice to him when they went back, because for the first probably 1 or 2 months, he just worked at one plastic surgery center, just doing women's tummy tucks and breast implants, basically, because he didn't want to be around kids. He could be around a very small group of people, not have to be in a big hospital where everyone's looking at him. Because honestly, that was really big too for us. We were on every news station, right? Every news station for a few days was this story, because here I am, a pediatrician, my website, my pictures pulled off my website. I'm on there. My son, Andy, you should, if anyone goes to my website is andysmom.com, but my son, Andy, was the head chorister for the Grand Rapids Choir of Men and Boys. He had the voice of an angel. I mean, his voice, I mean, I'm his mama, but wow, it's a beautiful, beautiful voice. And so that made for good television, honestly, to put him on TV singing. He has, at the last Christmas concert before he died, he had a solo part of the last verse of Away in the Manger, which is actually beautiful, because it talks about going to heaven and being in heaven. And so we all sang it like at his funeral reception, but it made good television. But that made us pretty well recognized, I would say, right? Yes. So out in public and things like that. So he was able to hide in that surgery center for a while, but the first time he had to do anesthesia on a child was really hard. I mean, he said, I was just so scared, because the last airway I'd had to do on a child was Andy's. And he just didn't know how he would be able to do it again. And he does. And it's amazing that he does. I mean, he's really able to compartmentalize it, and in a great way. And I mean, I can too, to an extent, although there are still some things that will kind of bother me. I have a couple times been scheduled to see a teenager right after a car accident, and I've had to politely kind of excuse myself and have someone else see that patient, because that just gets a little too hard for me.
Marcy,
to see a teen.
With everything that you do and what your husband does, have you guys got support? As in, I looked at what I do and I thought, I don't know why I never got myself a supervision counselor or a supervision coach for what I do. And I have now, but for a while I didn't. And I went through 2 burnouts while having that movement. And I thought, what am I doing? Everybody else who works with, even just as a counselor, not even in the field of grief. And I understand, there's, again, I don't want to compare, but everybody in the right mind who does work like that has a supervision counselor or has a supervision coach, and I didn't. And I don't know why I thought I didn't need one, or didn't even think about getting one, let me put it that way. So I got one, and I'm really grateful that I did, because it really supports me very differently, and that's where I can share. Have you and or your husband got support on an ongoing basis?
So interestingly, I had a therapist that I worked with. It's funny, because I was recommended to go to her 3 times before I finally did. I felt like when the third person said, you need to meet Nancy, I thought, okay, I guess I really need to call Nancy. And interestingly enough, I called Nancy and Nancy said, I've been praying you would call me, because of course she had seen my story on TV, because everyone saw my story on TV, and she sees exclusively bereaved parents. That's just bereaved mothers primarily. And that's her entire practice. She used to be the bereavement coordinator at the Children's Hospital here in town, which is the hospital I'm affiliated with. So she worked with them, and then she transferred to her own private practice where she really just sees bereaved moms. And that was what I really needed. So I was a few months in, I had just, so I tried going back to work. I said this at the beginning. I tried going back to work just a few weeks afterwards because my husband really encouraged me to do so, because it was very helpful to him.
Yeah.
And so he thought it would be helpful to me. Like, you just need to get back to work. You'll be better if you just go back to work. But we're very different. And for me, it was a disaster. So what ended up happening, I think I did okay. I didn't like give horrible care. But what happened was I would go, I would see a patient, I would leave, I would cry. Yeah. I would go in and see the next patient, I would leave, and I would cry. I cried between almost every single patient.
Wow.
And I had the look, the look that people give you, that, oh, I'm so sorry for you. Yeah. I'm so glad I'm really not you. That pity look. I mean, every time I got the pity look, like, I can't do this. Yeah. I can't. So I left, and I got this feeling like I'm never going to be able to do this. Yeah. So I went to the therapist and I said, I'm done. I'm never going to be able to be a pediatrician again. And she said to me, I promise you, if you want to, we will get you there. Mm. And it was just so nice to have someone say, first of all, it was beautiful the way she said it, because she knew she could get me there, and she pretty much knew that I would get there, but she did say, if you want to, we will get you there. So she didn't put me in a box that I had to, but she wanted to make sure I knew that was open to me. Yeah. And sure enough, she did. And I saw her for quite some time. So she was incredibly helpful to me. And I feel like such a perfect person, because she worked in the hospital for so long. So she got like the doctor side of it too. And it was great. And then my husband, one of his very best friends, is a social worker who specializes in post-traumatic stress disorder and grief. So what ended up happening with him is my husband never saw a counselor, but he would always go on walks with Ben. So he's constantly going on walks with Ben. And I knew that the walks with Ben were more than just walks.
Of course.
Right? And they were so helpful to him. And I said this on a live stream not too long ago, and Ben was listening to the live stream. He was like, I wasn't really doing therapy on him. Like, I know you weren't really doing therapy for him, but he was, right, in such a way. And to have that friend and someone that my husband could be really open with, because the problem when you're bereaved parents, when you're a couple and you're grieving as a couple, if you're having a really bad day and your spouse is having a relatively good day, it can be really hard to want, you worry about bringing them down. Yeah. Like, he's having a pretty good day today. Do I really want to bring him down?
You don't want to burden them. You don't want to bother them.
You don't want to burden them. And so that's why it's so nice if you have someone else that you know you're not going to bring them down. Right? So on the days that
you tiptoe around, you do tread on eggshells sometimes, because for that exact reason. And Marcy, I'm very aware of the time. We're actually on the hour now, but there is one more question I'd really like to ask you. And I understand that will bring us over time, but I hope our viewers will forgive us for that. We haven't even mentioned your 2 other kids yet. How did your daughter and your stepson deal with the news? When and how did they find out? Where were they at the time?
Yeah, it was actually kind of terrible. So my foster son, like I said, was at work. We were able to call parents of a friend of his to say, you need to go to Culver's, go get him and tell him and bring him to the hospital. So that went okay. It took a couple times to get through to them, but we got through. my daughter, it was kind of a disaster. So we obviously weren't going to call her. She was just at the house by herself. She was waiting to leave to her violin lesson. So she was just home. I told my pastor, and so one of the pastors was going to go to the house, and it's quite a drive. So he's going to go to the house and go get her. In the meantime, my office mates all went to the hospital. So like there were 30 or so people at the hospital, and they were trying to decide who was going to go tell my daughter and go get my daughter. And they were trying to have one of them, but somehow someone from the hospital, I have no idea who, and it bothers me horribly, but someone from the hospital called my daughter at home. And she answered the phone, and this woman said, are you the sister of Peter Larson? Which Peter is, of course, the son that survived and was now in the hospital, because we were all taken to the hospital, all in different ambulances, but we all arrived at the hospital, and asked if she was sister. And she said, yes. And he says, well, there's been an accident. And she's like, are people okay? And the woman said, well, your dad is talking. I don't know. So she knew dad was alive. She sort of knew Peter was alive, but she thought Peter was in really bad shape.
Yeah.
But anyway, the woman ended up hanging up, and it was horrible. And for like 10 minutes, she was just waiting for the pastor to come. And then the pastor did come and have to tell her that Andy had died. So, and like I said, I've never figured out who did it. No one's ever, but it was not done well. And obviously it's been
How
hard.
old was your daughter at that time?
She was 16.
Yeah. Oh my.
So they were 12, 14, and 16.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how not to do that. But I don't know. I think she thought she was doing an okay thing, but it was clearly not. She said, we're going to send someone from the hospital. I don't know. There were all sorts of different people that were wanting to go get her. But what's sad is that I had arranged it, right? I had found the right person, our pastor, who I wanted to pick her up. So it's not that, I mean, it was one of the very first things that I did was arrange who to tell, because that's you. I mean, I talked to you in that interview, and what was one of your first things after Rob died was you thinking about your kids and how to tell your kids and how to make your kids know they're safe and whatever. I mean, as a parent, that was your first thing.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, the person that actually told Peter that Andy was dead was me.
Yeah.
I mean, we made it to the hospital. We were in there together, and I had to say to Peter,
until he was at the hospital.
He did not know. I mean, I think he sort of knew, but he didn't know.
Yeah.
So I said, Peter, Andy didn't make it. Andy died. And he rubbed my arm. Peter rubbed my arm to comfort me. So I remember my other pastor, we have two pastors, the older pastor was there, and he said, when I saw Peter rub your arm and how you were as a family, I knew you were going to be okay.
Wow.
You know, and my daughter did make it, and you know, we're broken, but we're making it. We're making it.
How old was your stepson at the time?
Now I lost the sound for you, but I think it's me.
I just wanted to know how old your stepson was at the time when Andy passed.
I can't hear you again.
You can't hear us. That's very unfortunate, but we are at the end of our interview now, and I am so honored to have heard your story. For you to come and share your story so openly and so on such a raw basis with us, I feel really, really honored to have heard about your family, at least a little bit. I feel there's so much more to it than just, we literally just scratched the surface with that. I would really invite everybody who is just as touched as I am by this story to follow Marcy, follow her podcast. I will ask Marcy to share that in the comments below after the interview. So we'll come back in and answer any questions or comments that you might have had. And Marcy, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing your heart, for sharing your family with us, and the beautiful story about Andy and all your other kids, really, and your husband. I'm very, very honored that our paths have crossed. Thank you so much. I'm not really sure if you can hear me again now. Can you?
I am good now. I keep
Good.
wanting to.
Are there any final words that you would like to share before we go?
Well, I'm just going to say my website that people can go to is andysmom.com. On Facebook, I am always Andy's mom. On Twitter and
We will be
Instagram.
sharing all the social links anyway, so
all there. That's all there. So thank you so much, and I am just honored to have shared with you.
Thank you so much. I say blessings to you, Marcy, from Christopher Gaston as well. He was one of my interviewees. So we'll get back to all your questions, comments, if you have any, and we will be sharing all the links. So thank you, Marcy, so much for your time. Thank you for being here today. And everybody who wants to hear more information, wait for the links to be shared in the comments below. So much love to all of you. This is Marcy and Marie signing off. Bye for now.